Hey everyone, welcome to Lurking Shadows. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Here, we explore the darkest and most spine-chilling real-life horror stories out there. For those of you returning, it's great to have you back, my friends. In today's video, we're venturing into unsettling tales from the Appalachian Mountains. From sinister stalkers to cold-blooded killers and eerie things that roam these mountains at night, these stories are as mysterious as they are terrifying. The beauty of the Appalachian Mountains hides a darkness that's not easily explained. This video is a compilation of some of the most unforgettable stories featured on this channel. The ones that have stuck with me long after I first heard them. If you've been here for a while, hold on tight, as I'm already working on fresh new stories that will haunt you. And if you're just joining us, thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoy these tales as much as I did in gathering and sharing them. Remember, viewer discretion is advised. I'm Sarah. I was 28 when I decided to escape the grind of my city job by heading into the Appalachian Mountains for a solo backpacking trip. It wasn't some grand adventure or a quest for self-discovery. I just needed to unplug after a messy divorce that left me questioning everything. My ex had taken most of our friends in the split, and the apartment felt like a cage. So I packed my gear: tent, sleeping bag, water filter, a few MREs, a multi-tool knife, and an old topo map I'd bought at a thrift store, and drove out to a lesser-known trailhead near Harlan, Kentucky. The area was called Whispering Hollow, named after some old mining legend about echoes that sounded like voices, but I figured that was just folklore to scare tourists. I didn't tell anyone exactly where I was going, just a vague, hiking in the apps, text to my sister. No GPS app, no satellite phone. I wanted isolation, real and raw. The drive took longer than expected. The roads twisted like snakes through dense forest, and by the time I reached the gravel pull-off that served as the trailhead, the sun was dipping low. No other cars, no signs of recent hikers. Just a weathered wooden post with a faded sign reading, Whispering Hollow Trail, enter at own risk. No rescue beyond mile 5. I shrugged it off as typical backcountry caution and shouldered my pack. The first few miles were invigorating. The path climbed steadily through oak and hickory groves, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Squirrels chattered overhead, and a distant creek bubbled like laughter. I felt the tension from the past months melting away with each step. By dusk, I'd covered about 6 miles and found a small clearing off the trail, backed by a rocky outcrop that would block the wind. I pitched my tent, boiled water for a dehydrated pasta meal, and sat on a log, watching fireflies flicker like tiny stars. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl. I crawled into my sleeping bag around 10 p.m., exhausted but content, and fell asleep to the gentle rustle of leaves. I woke up abruptly sometime after midnight. At first, I couldn't place what had disturbed me. No storm, no animal noises. Then I heard it, a faint whispering. It sounded like voices murmuring just beyond the edge of hearing, like wind through branches, but with syllables that almost formed words. I sat up, heart pounding, and unzipped the tent flap a crack. The clearing was bathed in moonlight, empty except for my gear. The whispers seemed to come from the trees to the east, rising and falling like a conversation I couldn't quite catch. Probably just the wind echoing off the rocks, I told myself, zipping back up and lying down. But sleep didn't come easy. The whispers continued intermittently, sometimes closer, sometimes fading, until dawn broke and they stopped entirely. In the morning, I shook off the unease. The sun filtered through the canopy, birds sang, and the world felt normal again. I packed up and continued deeper into the hollow. The trail narrowed, overgrown in places with ferns and briars that snagged at my pants. Around noon, I stumbled upon an old mining shack, half collapsed and reclaimed by vines. Rusted tools lay scattered outside, a pickaxe head, a lantern frame, shards of glass from broken bottles. Curiosity drew me closer. Inside, the air was musty, thick with dust. On the dirt floor, someone had scratched crude symbols, interlocking circles, jagged lines like lightning bolts, and what looked like a human figure with elongated limbs. Below it, faint letters spelled "They listen." I snapped a quick photo with my disposable camera, no phone signal anyway, and moved on, chalking it up to bored vandals or old superstitions. By late afternoon, the trail descended into a shaded valley where the trees grew denser, their trunks twisted as if warped by some unseen force. The air grew cooler, heavier, with a faint metallic tang, like blood mixed with wet soil. I set up camp near a small stream, filtering water and starting a modest fire to ward off the chill. As the sun set, the whispers returned, clearer this time. They seemed to emanate from the underbrush, fragmented words like lost, come, deeper. I froze, straining to listen. It had to be my imagination, amplified by isolation. I doused the fire early and retreated to the tent, knife in hand, but the voices persisted, circling the campsite like invisible speakers. At one point, they sounded right outside the nylon wall. "Sarah, we see you." My name. How? I hadn't spoken it aloud. Panic surged. I gripped the knife tighter, whispering to myself that it was paranoia, fatigue playing tricks. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Sleep evaded me entirely that night. The whispers grew insistent, overlapping like a chorus of the damned. Around 3 a.m., footsteps joined them, soft, deliberate pads on the forest floor, circling the tent. Not animal-like, too human. I didn't dare look out. Instead, I huddled in my bag, breath shallow, waiting for dawn. When light finally crept in, I emerged to find the ground around my tent disturbed. Small, barefoot prints, child-sized but with elongated toes that dug deep into the earth. They formed a perfect circle, as if marking territory. No other signs, no trash, no gear left behind. Just those prints and a single, smooth stone placed at the tent's entrance, etched with a spiral symbol like the one in the shack. I broke camp in a rush, heart racing, and pushed onward, hoping to loop back to the trailhead by evening. But the path seemed altered. Landmarks I'd noted, a fallen log, a distinctive boulder, were gone or shifted. The whispers followed, now during the day, murmuring from the trees. "Stay, join us." The metallic smell intensified, making my head swim. Around midday, I found a clearing with a ring of stones, similar to a fire pit but larger, about 15 feet across. In the center stood a weathered wooden post, carved with more symbols and names. Dozens of them, scratched deep. Emily 1987. Mark 2004. Sarah. My name unfinished, as if waiting. Fresh scratches gleamed wetly in the wood. I backed away, nausea rising. This wasn't a prank. It felt ancient, malevolent. Pressing on, the forest closed in. Branches clawed at me. Roots tripped my feet. The whispers evolved into pleas. "Don't leave. We need you." By late afternoon, exhaustion set in. I stopped to rest against a tree, only to feel it vibrate under my palm, as if something inside was humming. Pulling away, I saw sap oozing from the bark in patterns, more spirals. Then, from the corner of my eye, movement, a figure tall and gaunt, slipping behind a trunk 50 yards away. Pale skin, elongated limbs like the carvings. It didn't pursue, just watched, head tilted unnaturally. I ran, pack bouncing, breath ragged. The trail vanished entirely, forcing me to bushwhack through thickets that tore my skin. Night fell faster than expected. The whispers swelled to a cacophony, echoing my thoughts, doubts, fears from the divorce, secrets I'd buried. Worthless, alone, stay forever. Footsteps multiplied, closing in from all sides. I stumbled into another clearing, flashlight beam shaking. There, in the beam's light, stood the figure, closer now. It was humanoid but wrong. Skin like stretched parchment over bones, eyes hollow sockets that seemed to absorb light, mouth a thin slit whispering my name. Behind it, more shapes emerged from the trees, dozens, varying sizes, all elongated, all whispering. They formed a circle, advancing slowly. Terror fueled me. I slashed with my knife at the nearest, feeling it connect with something soft yet unyielding. A shriek pierced the air, not human, more like wind through a cavern. I bolted through a gap, running blindly. Thorns ripped my clothes, branches whipped my face. The whispers pursued, but fainter. Hours blurred, maybe 2, maybe more, until I collapsed near a stream, sobbing. Dawn brought silence. I followed the water downhill, emerging onto a logging road by midday. A passing trucker picked me up, no questions asked beyond, "You okay?" I never returned. Sold my gear, moved to the coast. But sometimes in quiet moments I hear whispers on the wind. "Sarah, come back." And I wonder if they're still waiting, carving my name complete. What I'm about to tell you happened in the late summer of 2025, in a desolate stretch of the Appalachian Mountains in southwestern Virginia, a place called Ironvale Hollow in the Jefferson National Forest. I've spent the last few weeks trying to burn the memories out of my mind, to pin them on dehydration or a fevered brain, but the burns on my knuckles and the way my lungs seize when I hear metal clanging keep the truth raw. I'm telling you this now because I need to warn you. Some hollows in these mountains don't just hide ghosts, they forge them, and they'll melt you down to join their ranks. If you've ever felt the Appalachians turn molten, like the air itself is forging a blade, you'll know why I'm vowing never to return. I was 31, a blacksmith running a small forge in Blacksburg, crafting knives and tools for locals and tourists. The work was my anchor after losing my mom to cancer the year before, her absence a constant ache. Ironvale Hollow came up in a barroom tale from an old customer, a retired miner who called it the Devil's Anvil. He said it was an old ironworks site from the 1800s, abandoned after a furnace explosion killed dozens, their screams still echoing in the metal scraps left behind. He warned me the hollow forged souls, binding them to the earth. I thought it was just a yarn, but the idea of finding raw iron for my forge pulled me in. I packed my gear, hammer, gloves, a .44 Magnum for bears, and supplies for 3 days, and headed out alone, chasing a spark of inspiration. The trailhead was a rusted gate off a logging road, marked by a sign so faded only Ironvale was legible. The air was heavy, smelling of coal dust and something sharp, like hot steel. I hiked in, the path twisting through pines and sycamores, their branches draped with lichen that glowed faintly, like slag in a crucible. By noon, I reached the hollow, a sunken basin where the trees grew sparse, their trunks blackened as if scorched. The ground was littered with iron shards, nails, horseshoes, jagged chunks, some fresh, glinting like they'd just cooled. The silence was thick, broken only by a low clang, like a hammer striking an anvil, steady and deep. I found the ironworks ruins, a crumbled furnace, its bricks fused into grotesque shapes, and a slag heap that shimmered like molten glass. I set up camp nearby, on a patch of bare earth that felt warm, like it held a fire below. As I explored, I found a rusted anvil half buried, etched with symbols, flames, eyes, a hammer piercing a heart. Names were carved around it. T. Black 1867, L. Greer 1941, E. Tate 2024. Mine was there, fresh, the iron still warm. My heart lurched. I hadn't touched it. The clang grew louder, forming whispers. "Forge, stay." I grabbed my hammer, scanning the ruins. Shadows flickered, tall, angular, like figures made of molten metal, glinting in the dusk. I called out, "Anyone there?" The whispers laughed, a sound like sparks on steel. My camera caught nothing but static, the screen showing my face, distorted, eyes glowing, mouth a slag heap. I bagged an iron shard for proof, but it burned through my glove, leaving welts on my knuckles shaped like flames. The clanging sharpened. Melt, give. By dusk, I camped on a rocky outcrop, hoping distance would help. I built a fire, its flames tinged blue, spitting embers that didn't die. The whispers turned to voices chanting. "Blood for the anvil." My recorder caught my notes, but playback added a hiss. "Yours, ours." Shadows moved beyond the fire. Figures, their bodies liquid iron, faces shifting. My mom, my old mentor, strangers with molten eyes. They didn't walk, they flowed, leaving trails of slag. I drew my magnum, flashlight sweeping. Eyes glowed back, white-hot, unblinking, dozens in the dark. Night was a furnace. The clanging was constant, shaking the ground, and the figures closed in, their voices naming my grief. My mom's last breath, my failure to say goodbye, the guilt I'd buried. Something struck my tent, a molten claw, searing the nylon, leaving burns that smelled of charred flesh. I burst out, gun raised, firing into the dark. The shots melted midair, dripping like wax, and the figures laughed. "Feed the forge." One touched my hand, its grip burning, welts spreading, forming eyes that stared back. Dawn brought a haze, the air shimmering like heat off a forge. My tent was ringed with iron shards, arranged in flame patterns, still warm. I ran, the hollow fighting, trees dripping slag, ground pulsing with heat. The path looped, bringing me back to the anvil, my name glowing like embers. The voices roared. "Melt with us." I found a cave, its mouth a blackened scar, hoping for refuge. Inside, the air was scorching, smelling of iron and blood. The walls were fused with metal, carved with flames, eyes, names, hundreds, mine among them, molten and dripping. Bones lay scattered, some human, some fused into tools, knives, hammers, still sharp. The clanging filled the cave, a hammer's rhythm. Forge, bind. The figures appeared, their bodies molten, faces shifting, my mom's smiling, then melting into slag. "You're home." One hissed, its hand searing my thigh, welts forming hammers that burned. I fired my magnum, bullets liquefying, useless. My hammer swung, striking nothing but air, the figures weaving around me, their touches branding my skin. They pulled me toward a pit, its depths glowing red, faces swirling, miners, hikers, my mom, all screaming. "Join the anvil." I fought, slashing with my knife, burns spreading, my knuckles cracking open. The cave shook, walls melting, but I clawed out, bursting into the hollow. The figures followed, their chants ablaze. Blood for the forge, the ground burned, iron shards rising like teeth, slicing my legs. I hid in a crevice, slag raining, their molten hands brushing my hair, searing my scalp. Night fell, the clanging a roar, the trees glowing like coals, their branches forging chains. One figure leaned close, its face my mom's, eyes molten. "You left me stay." Dawn broke, and I was crawling, half melted, to the trailhead. The hollow released me, trees cooling, shards sinking back. My truck was there, keys in my pocket despite losing my pack. My knuckles and thighs were raw, welts forming flames that pulsed with my heartbeat. A hunter found me, drove me to a hospital in Roanoke. They called it chemical burns, maybe from old mine runoff, but the welts wouldn't heal, flaring under firelight. My gear was gone, recorder blank except for one clip, my voice screaming, "I'm sorry," over a clang like 1,000 hammers. The rangers searched Ironvale Hollow, nothing. No anvil, no bones, no cave. The ironworks explosion of 1866 was real. 40 men, burned alive, their bodies unrecovered. Locals say the hollow was a blood forge, a site where ancient smiths offered souls to the mountain, binding them to the iron. The anvil wraiths take the broken, forging their pain into the earth. Hikers vanish there, no trace, just echoes of screams and clanging. I quit blacksmithing, moved to Norfolk, far from fire. The clanging follows, in engines, in storms, in my own pulse. My welts scar over, but they glow in the dark, forming eyes that watch me. I see them in mirrors, white hot and unblinking. If you're in those mountains, avoid Ironvale Hollow. Don't touch the iron, don't listen to the clang. And if you see your name on an anvil, run. The forge has your scent, and it's ready to melt you down. What I'm about to tell you happened in the early spring of 2025 in a rugged, forgotten corner of the Appalachian Mountains in southern West Virginia, a place called Thornskull Gap in the George Washington National Forest. I've spent the last few months trying to drown the memories in work and whiskey, to call it a hallucination from fatigue or bad water, but the gashes on my thighs and the way my skin prickles when I hear rustling leaves keep the truth sharp. I'm telling you this now because I need to warn you. Some gaps in these mountains don't just hide danger, they summon it, and they'll carve you up to keep you there. If you've ever felt the Appalachians turn predatory, like the trees are whispering your sins, you'll know why I'm swearing off those trails forever. I was 34, a survival instructor running weekend courses for city folks craving wilderness skills. I'd seen it all, sprained ankles, bear encounters, panic attacks, but Thornskull Gap was new to me, a last-minute booking for a private client, a tech bro named Ryan who wanted a real challenge. He'd read about the gap online, some blog calling it the ultimate test, tied to stories of a 19th century outlaw hideout where bandits vanished, their screams heard for weeks after. Locals called it cursed, said the thorns drank blood. I scoffed. Every trail has its ghost story, but the pay was good, so I agreed. I packed my gear, first aid kit, machete, .45 Colt revolver, and enough supplies for 3 days. Ryan brought his own pack, plus a drone he swore would capture the vibe. The trailhead was a muddy cut off a coal road, marked by a splintered sign, Thornskull, no passage. The air was raw, smelling of sap and something metallic, like old coins. We hiked in, the path choked with thorn bushes that tore at our clothes, their barbs glinting like teeth. Ryan was all bravado, filming with his drone, but I noticed the forest silence. No birds, no bugs, just our boots and a faint, scratching sound, like nails on bark. By noon, we reached the gap, a narrow ravine where thorns formed a canopy, filtering light into a sickly green. The ground was soft, littered with sharp sticks that snapped underfoot, some too white, too smooth like bones. We found signs of the hideout, a collapsed cabin, rusted nails, and a fire pit with ash that looked fresh, though no one camped here. Ryan flew his drone, but it crashed within minutes, screen showing static and a flicker of something. Eyes maybe glowing red. Cheap tech, he laughed, but his voice shook. I found a thorn bush carved with symbols, a skull pierced by vines, eyes hollow, and names. R. Cole 1884, E. Hart 1968, J. Tate 2024. Mine was there, fresh, thorns stained red. Ryan's too. My stomach twisted. We hadn't touched it. The scratching grew louder, forming whispers. Stay, bleed. I gripped my machete, scanning the thorns. Shadows moved, quick, darting, like figures weaving through the brush. Ryan saw it too, his bravado gone, eyes wide. What was that? He whispered. I didn't answer, just pushed us forward, looking for a campsite. By dusk, we set up on a rocky ledge, the only spot free of thorns. I built a fire, its light swallowed by the gap's gloom. The whispers turned to voices, low and jagged. Cut, give. Ryan's drone, salvaged but dead, started humming, its camera lens reflecting not us but faces, pale, eyeless, mouth stretched in screams. Night was chaos. The voices chanted, circling the tent, naming my failures. My dad's death I couldn't prevent, the student I'd lost to a river crossing years ago. Ryan was worse, muttering about his ex, his guilt over a deal that ruined lives. Something slashed the tent, thorns, not knives, leaving gashes that oozed sap. I burst out, Colt drawn, flashlight catching eyes, red, too many, glinting in the thorns. Figures moved, their bodies woven from vines and bone, faces shifting. My dad, Ryan's ex, strangers with skull-like grins. They didn't walk, they slithered, thorns trailing like tails. I fired, bullets shredding vines, but they reformed, laughing. Blood for the gap. Ryan panicked, running into the thorns, screaming as they tore his skin. I grabbed him, my thighs gashed by barbs that moved, curling like fingers. The figures closed in, their voices a storm, peeling our minds. My grief, Ryan's greed, every secret laid bare. We stumbled to a cave, its mouth hidden by thorns, hoping for safety. Inside, the air was thick, smelling of blood and sap. The walls were carved with skull-vine symbols, names, hundreds, some fresh, mine and Ryan's among them, dripping red. Bones littered the floor, some human, some not, strung with thorny vines like garlands. The voices roared, the cave shaking. Feed, bind. The figures filled the space, their thorn bodies pulsing, eyes burning. One reached for Ryan, its face his ex's, vines wrapping his throat. You owe, it hissed. I hacked with my machete, cutting vines that bled black, but they grew back faster, snaring my legs. Ryan screamed, thorns piercing his arms, pulling him toward a pit where vines writhed like a living mouth. I fired my Colt, emptying the clip, but the figures only laughed, their voices my dad's. You failed, stay. I dragged Ryan, thorns cutting deep, my thighs burning, welts forming skull shapes. The cave twisted, walls closing, vines lashing like whips. We burst into the gap, the thorns alive, curling around us, the voices chanting. Blood binds forever. I hacked a path, Ryan half conscious, blood mixing with sap. Night fell, the gap a labyrinth, thorns shifting, blocking escape. We hid in a crevice, vines creeping closer, their touch like needles in my bones. The figures loomed, their faces shifting, whispering our sins, my cowardice, Ryan's betrayal. One leaned close, its skull face grinning. You're ours. Dawn broke, and we were crawling, bloodied, to the trailhead. The thorns parted, like they'd had their fill. My truck was there, keys in my pocket despite losing my pack. Ryan was catatonic, his arms scarred with vine patterns. My thighs were raw, gashes forming skulls that pulsed with my heartbeat. A trucker found us, drove us to a hospital in Beckley. They called it toxic exposure, thorns laced with some unknown bacteria. Ryan didn't speak, just stared, tracing skulls in the air. My gear was gone, camera blank except for one photo. The thorn bush, our names glowing, blood pooling at its roots. The rangers searched Thornskull Gap, nothing. No cave, no bones, no carvings. The outlaw hideout of 1884 was real, though. 12 men vanished, their screams heard for weeks. Locals say the gap was a blood ground, a place where Cherokee and settlers clashed, their deaths feeding the thorns. The spirits, thorn skulls, take the guilty, weaving their blood into the vines. Hikers disappear there, no trace, just whispers of screams and thorns. I quit teaching, moved to Richmond, far from forests. The voices follow, in wind, in creaking floors, in my own pulse. My scars flare under moonlight, forming eyes that watch me. I see them in shadows, red and unblinking. If you're in those mountains, avoid Thornskull Gap. Don't touch the thorns, don't listen to the whispers. And if you see your name carved in vines, run. The gap's already marked you, and it's hungry for more. I'm Ethan, 31, a freelance photographer with a knack for capturing the raw edges of the world, abandoned buildings, forgotten roads, places where time seems to have stopped. In the summer of 2024, I was chasing a new project, documenting the decaying remnants of old Appalachian mining towns. I'd read about a place called Blackthorn Hollow, tucked deep in the mountains near Pikeville, Kentucky. It was barely mentioned online, just a few obscure forum posts about a ghost town swallowed by the forest, with stories of strange lights and sounds. Perfect for my portfolio. I didn't want company. This was about solitude and the lens. I packed my camera gear, a lightweight tent, a gas stove, a machete for brush, and a tattered map from a library archive. I told my roommate I'd be gone a week, gave him the general area, and drove off without fanfare. The road to Blackthorn was a nightmare. Potholes deep enough to swallow tires, gravel spitting under my truck. The trailhead was just a gap in the trees, no sign, no marker, only a faint path winding into dense woods. My phone lost signal an hour before I even parked. The first day's hike was grueling but exhilarating. The trail climbed sharply through pines and sycamores, the air heavy with moss and decay. I snapped photos of twisted roots and rusted mining equipment half buried in the undergrowth, shovels, rail tracks, a broken lantern dangling from a tree like an ornament. By dusk, I reached a clearing near a dry creek bed, perfect for camp. I set up my tent, cooked a quick meal of rice and beans, and scrolled through my shots under the glow of my headlamp. The forest was quiet, save for the occasional snap of a twig, probably deer, I thought. I slept soundly, dreaming of sepia-toned ruins. I woke just before dawn to a low hum, like a generator running far off. It wasn't mechanical, though more organic, pulsing, like a heartbeat in the ground. I unzipped my tent and scanned the clearing. Nothing but shadows and mist curling between trees. The hum faded as the sun rose, so I chalked it up to my ears, playing tricks after a long day. I packed up and pushed deeper into the hollow, following the map toward the old town site. The trail grew faint, overtaken by ferns and briars that forced me to hack my way through with the machete. Around noon, I found the first sign of Blackthorn, a crumbling stone foundation, barely visible under a carpet of vines. Nearby, a rusted cart lay on its side, wheels frozen in place. I spent hours photographing the ruins, chimney stacks, collapsed roofs, a child's shoe half buried in the dirt. The place felt frozen, like the moment it was abandoned had been preserved in amber. As I explored, I noticed odd details. Scratched into a slab of concrete were symbols, jagged triangles, spirals with radiating lines, and what looked like a hand with 6 fingers. They weren't random graffiti. The cuts were precise, deep, like someone had spent hours carving them. I took close-ups, intrigued but uneasy. The air grew heavier, carrying a faint smell of ash and something sweeter, like overripe fruit. By late afternoon, I found a larger ruin, a church or what was left of it. The steeple had fallen, but the walls stood, covered in blackened moss. Inside, pews were overturned, and a wooden cross hung crooked above a shattered altar. On the floor, in faded chalk, was a single word: Keeper. My stomach twisted. I snapped a photo and left quickly, the word echoing in my head. I set up camp a mile away, in a small meadow surrounded by tall pines. The hum returned as the sun set, louder now, vibrating in my chest. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my stove as I heated soup. Then I heard a new sound, a slow, rhythmic scraping, like metal dragged across stone. It came from the direction of the church. I doused the stove, grabbed my machete, and listened. The scraping stopped, replaced by footsteps, heavy, deliberate, crunching through leaves. They circled my camp, just beyond the tree line, never breaking into the open. I shone my flashlight, but the beam caught only branches. The hum intensified, almost drowning out the steps, and then both stopped abruptly. Silence. I didn't sleep, sitting with my back to a tree, machete across my lap, eyes straining into the dark. At first light, I checked the ground around my tent. No footprints, but the grass was flattened in a wide arc, as if something heavy had paced around me all night. A single object lay near my tent, a rusted nail, bent into a crude spiral. It hadn't been there before. My heart raced as I packed, deciding to head back to the trailhead. But the map seemed useless now. Landmarks didn't match. A boulder I'd photographed was gone. A fork in the path had vanished. The hum followed me, constant, like a swarm of bees trapped in my skull. By midday, I stumbled into a clearing I hadn't seen before. In the center stood a tree, ancient and gnarled, its trunk carved with hundreds of symbols, triangles, spirals, hands. At its base was a pile of bones, small and brittle, some animal, some not. A human jawbone sat on top, polished clean, with a fresh spiral etched into it. I backed away, nausea rising. The hum became words, faint but clear. Ethan, stay. My name, spoken by no one, echoing from the trees. I ran, camera bouncing against my chest, machete in hand. The forest seemed to shift, paths twisting, trees leaning closer. I tripped over a root and fell hard, my camera skidding into the dirt. When I retrieved it, the screen showed a photo I hadn't taken. Me, sleeping in my tent, shot from above. My breath caught. I hadn't set up a tripod, hadn't used a timer. The hum grew louder, the words sharper. Keeper sees you. I scrambled to my feet and kept running, the forest blurring around me. Night fell too soon. The hum was deafening now, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. I found a hollowed-out tree and crawled inside, hoping to hide. The footsteps returned, closer, accompanied by the scraping sound, metal on stone, relentless. Then a new sound, a low, guttural chant, not human, like rocks grinding together. Through a gap in the tree, I saw it. A figure, tall and impossibly thin, draped in tattered cloth that shimmered like oil. Its face was featureless, just smooth, pale skin, but it turned toward me as if it could see. In its hand was a rusted pickaxe, dragging behind it, carving a spiral in the dirt. It stopped, tilted its head, and the chant became my name. Ethan joined the keeper. I bolted from the tree, running blind. Branches tore at my skin, blood trickling down my face. The figure didn't chase. It didn't need to. It was everywhere, stepping from behind trees, always just out of reach. The forest itself seemed alive, roots shifting underfoot, branches snapping like traps. I don't know how long I ran, hours, maybe days. My water ran out, my food long gone. Finally, I stumbled onto a dirt road, collapsing as headlights approached. A ranger pulled over, his face pale as I babbled about the keeper. He didn't ask questions, just drove me to a gas station and told me to go home. When I developed my photos, most were blank, black frames, like the camera couldn't see. But one showed the figure, standing in the church, pickaxe raised, featureless face staring directly at the lens. I burned it. I haven't gone near a forest since. Sometimes in my apartment, I hear the hum, faint but there, and I check the locks twice, knowing it's waiting. I'm Lucas, 29, a high school history teacher who'd always been drawn to the past. Old battlefields, ghost towns, places where stories linger like dust. In late fall of 2024, I decided to spend a long weekend exploring the Appalachian foothills near Grayson, Virginia. I'd found a reference in an old library book about a place called Mercy's Hollow, a forgotten settlement abandoned after a mining collapse in the 1920s. The book hinted at local legends, disappearances, strange sounds, a choir that sang without voices. I wasn't chasing ghosts. I just wanted to walk where history felt alive. I packed my backpack with camping gear, a notebook, a flashlight, a hunting knife, and a cheap voice recorder to capture ambient sounds for a side project. I told my girlfriend I'd be back in 4 days, left a note with my planned route, and drove out alone, craving the quiet. The trailhead was unmarked, just a dirt pull-off on a winding road bordered by skeletal trees. No cell signal, no other cars, only a faint path leading into the woods. The first day was crisp and clear, the trail meandering through pines and maples, their leaves carpeting the ground in red and gold. I hiked about 8 miles, snapping photos of moss-covered rocks and the occasional rusted nail embedded in a tree. By dusk, I found a flat spot near a shallow creek, perfect for my tent. I set up camp, boiled water for instant coffee, and started my recorder to catch the evening sounds, crickets, wind, the trickle of water. It felt peaceful, like stepping into a painting. I slept deeply, lulled by the forest's hum. I woke around 2 a.m. to silence. Not just quiet, absolute, suffocating silence. No crickets, no wind, nothing. My recorder was still running, but when I checked it, the last hour was blank, just static. Then I heard it, a low, harmonic drone, like voices humming in unison, coming from the trees across the creek. It wasn't music, not exactly, more like a vibration that crawled into my bones. I grabbed my flashlight and knife, unzipped the tent, and scanned the darkness. The beam caught nothing but branches, but the drone grew louder, forming faint words. "Find us, listen," my heart pounded. I called out, "Who's there?" The sound stopped instantly, replaced by a single sharp crack, like a branch snapping under weight. I waited, frozen, but nothing came. I didn't sleep again that night, sitting with my back against my pack, knife in hand. Morning brought sunlight and birdsong, easing the tension. I chalked the drone up to exhaustion, or some acoustic trick of the hollow. I packed up and followed the trail deeper, aiming for the old settlement. The path grew rougher, roots twisting across it like veins. Around noon, I found the first trace of Mercy's Hollow, a crumbling well, its stones slick with black moss. Nearby, a rusted pickaxe lay half buried in the dirt, its handle splintered. I recorded a quick note about it, but when I played it back, my voice was overlaid with static and a faint hum, like the one from the night before. Unsettled, I kept moving. By mid-afternoon, I reached the settlement's remains, scattered foundations, a collapsed barn, and a small cemetery with weathered headstones. Most were illegible, but one stood out. Mercy's Choir, 1923, taken by the hollow. I snapped a photo, my skin prickling. The air felt heavy now, thick with a scent like damp earth and something sour, like spoiled milk. I set up camp a half-mile away, in a clearing surrounded by dense oaks. As the sun set, the drone returned, louder, more distinct. It wasn't just a hum now, words formed, overlapping. "Join us, stay." I turned on my recorder, hoping to capture it, but the device shut off, its battery drained despite being fully charged that morning. Then came footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling the clearing. I swept my flashlight around, catching glimpses of movement, shadows darting between trees, too tall, too thin to be human. I shouted, "Leave me alone." The drone stopped, but the footsteps continued, closer now. I gripped my knife, heart hammering, and stayed in the tent, listening as the steps paused just outside, followed by a soft scratch, like nails on nylon. At dawn, I checked the ground. No footprints, but the grass was pressed flat in a spiral pattern around my tent, as if something had walked in circles all night. A single object lay near the entrance, a smooth, flat stone etched with a symbol, a circle with radiating lines, like a sun with too many rays. It matched one I'd seen on a headstone. I packed up, determined to leave, but the trail seemed different, narrower, the trees leaning inward. The drone followed me, now during the day, whispering my name. "Lucas, we know you." I moved faster, checking my map, but landmarks were gone. A stream had vanished, a ridge wasn't where it should be. Panic crept in. The air grew colder, the sour smell stronger. By late afternoon, I stumbled into a new clearing. In the center stood a tree, its trunk carved with dozens of symbols, circles, lines, and distorted faces with hollow eyes. At its base was a pile of bones, some animal, some human, a finger bone, a rib, all polished clean. A fresh carving caught my eye. Lucas, 2024. My name, etched deep, the wood still wet with sap. The drone swelled, words clear now. "You belong to us." I ran, branches tearing at my clothes, the forest closing in. Shadows moved in my peripheral vision, tall, gaunt figures with limbs too long, faces featureless yet watching. They didn't chase, just appeared, always just ahead or beside me, guiding me deeper. Night fell, and the drone became a chorus, deafening, vibrating through the ground. I found a small cave, barely a crack in a rocky outcrop, and squeezed inside, hoping to hide. The footsteps followed, stopping just outside. The chant shifted. "Lucas, sing with us," then scratching, claws on stone, slow and deliberate. I shone my flashlight, and for a moment I saw it. A figure crouched at the entrance, skin like ash, no eyes, just a gaping slit for a mouth, humming my name. It reached inside, fingers long and jointless, grazing my boot. I screamed, slashing with my knife. The blade hit something soft, and a wail echoed, not from the figure, but from the cave itself, like the rock was alive. I scrambled out, running blindly, the chorus pursuing. My flashlight flickered, then died. I tripped, fell into a ditch, and lay there sobbing as the voices closed in. Dawn broke, and the sound stopped. I crawled out, battered and bleeding, and followed a faint path downhill. Hours later, I reached a dirt road. A farmer in a pickup stopped, his face pale as I stammered about the choir. He drove me to town without a word. Back home, I checked my recorder. The files were corrupted, but one played, my voice describing the well, overlaid with a hum and a whisper. Lucas, forever ours. I smashed the recorder. I don't teach history anymore. At night, I hear the drone, faint but growing, and I keep my knife by the bed, knowing they're still singing. I'm Mia, 27, a graphic designer who traded city lights for the solitude of the wilderness whenever I could. In early spring of 2025, I needed a break from deadlines and the constant buzz of notifications. I'd heard about a remote trail in the Appalachian Mountains near Monterey, Tennessee, called Raven's Cut. It was barely documented, mentioned only in a dusty guidebook I found in a used bookstore, describing it as a path less traveled, steeped in shadow. The allure of untouched nature and a chance to sketch in peace drew me in. I packed light, a small tent, sketchpad, charcoal pencils, a water filter, a hatchet, and a basic GPS unit. I told my roommate I'd be gone 5 days, left a vague itinerary, and drove out, eager to lose myself in the wild. The road to Raven's Cut was a twisting, gravel-strewn mess, flanked by dense forest that seemed to swallow sound. The trailhead was little more than a gap in the underbrush, marked by a single weathered post with no sign. My phone died before I even parked, and the GPS flickered but held. The first day's hike was serene, the trail winding through cedar and hemlock, the air sharp with pine. I sketched gnarled roots and lichen-covered rocks, losing myself in the details. By dusk, I found a clearing near a rocky overhang, perfect for camping. I set up my tent, filtered water from a nearby stream, and cooked a quick oatmeal packet over a small fire. The forest was alive with soft sounds, crickets, a distant owl, the rustle of leaves. I fell asleep sketching by headlamp, content in the solitude. I woke abruptly around 1 a.m. to a low, rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat echoing through the ground. It wasn't loud, but it vibrated in my chest, steady and unnatural. I sat up, clutching my hatchet, and listened. The forest had gone silent. No crickets, no wind, just the thump, thump, thump. I unzipped the tent and shone my flashlight. The clearing was empty, but the beam caught something odd. A faint trail of flattened grass leading into the trees, as if something heavy had dragged itself through. The thumping stopped as I stepped out, replaced by a faint whisper, almost like a sigh, saying, "Mia, closer." My name, clear as day, sent a chill down my spine. I hadn't told anyone my name out here. I retreated to the tent, hatchet in hand, and stayed awake, heart racing, until dawn. Morning light brought calm, but the unease lingered. I checked the clearing and found no footprints, just that strange, flattened trail fading into the underbrush. I packed up, deciding to push deeper, hoping distance would shake the weirdness. The trail grew narrower, roots and vines tangling underfoot. Around noon, I stumbled across an old stone structure, half buried in moss and ivy. It looked like an altar, not a building, 5 flat stones arranged in a pentagon, each etched with symbols, spirals, cross lines, and what looked like a clawed hand. In the center was a shallow pit, blackened as if burned for years, with a faint smell of ash and decay. I sketched it quickly, my hands shaking, and moved on, feeling watched. By afternoon, I reached a valley where the trees seemed older, their trunks twisted into unnatural shapes, like frozen screams. The air grew thick, carrying a sour, metallic tang, like blood mixed with rust. I set up camp on a small ridge, hoping the elevation would feel safer. It didn't. As dusk fell, the thumping returned louder, accompanied by whispers. "Mia, kneel." I gripped my hatchet, scanning the trees with my flashlight. Shadows moved just beyond the beam, tall, thin shapes that vanished when I focused on them. Then, a new sound, a slow, scraping drag, like stone on stone, coming from the valley below. I stayed in the tent, barely breathing, as the sounds circled closer. Something tapped the tent pole once, sharp and deliberate, then silence. I didn't sleep, clutching the hatchet until my knuckles ached. At first light, I found the clearing altered. The grass around my tent was pressed into a spiral, and at its center was a small, smooth stone, etched with the same clawed hand symbol from the altar. The GPS was dead, screen blank despite fresh batteries. I packed in a frenzy, desperate to leave, but the trail seemed wrong. Paths I'd marked with broken twigs were gone, trees leaning closer, blocking the way. The thumping followed, now during the day, pulsing through the ground. Whispers wove through it. "Mia, you're ours," I ran, tripping over roots, my sketchpad tearing against thorns. By midday, I found another altar, identical to the first, but fresher, the stones less weathered. In the pit lay bones, small, delicate, some human, some not, arranged in a spiral. A fresh carving on one stone read, "Mia, 2025. My heart stopped. I dropped my sketchpad and ran. The forest seemed to fight me. Branches snapped at my face, roots rose like traps. The whispers grew louder, chanting my name in unison, the thumping shaking the earth. I saw them then, figures in the trees, tall and gaunt, with skin like charred bark, eyes glowing faintly red like embers. They didn't chase, just watched, appearing and vanishing as I stumbled forward. Night fell too fast, the thumping deafening. I found a hollow under a fallen tree and crawled inside, covering myself with leaves, praying to be invisible. The dragging sound returned closer, accompanied by a low chant, guttural and ancient, like stones grinding into words. "Mia, offer yourself." Through a gap in the roots, I saw it, a figure, taller than the others, draped in tattered cloth that writhed like smoke. Its face was a void, no features, just a black expanse that seemed to pull light in. It carried a stone slab, dragging it behind, carving a spiral in the dirt. It stopped near my hiding spot, tilting its head as if listening. The whispers became a scream. "Kneel." I bit my lip to keep from crying out, blood mixing with dirt. The figure raised the slab, and for a moment, I thought it would crush me. Then it turned, dragging the stone away, the chant fading. I waited until dawn, trembling, then crawled out. The forest was silent, but the air felt alive, watching. I ran, no direction, just moving. Hours later, I stumbled onto a dirt road. A logger's truck nearly hit me. The driver stopped, cursing, then saw my face and softened. He drove me to a gas station without questions. Back home, I burned my sketches, but one page survived, slipped under my bed. A drawing of the altar, with a figure I didn't remember sketching, its void face staring out. I hear the thumping at night now, faint but growing, and I keep the hatchet close, knowing the altar waits. I'm Caleb, 34, a park ranger turned writer who spent years patrolling the Appalachian backcountry before trading boots for a keyboard. In June 2025, I needed material for a book on forgotten trails, so I headed to a remote stretch near Boone, North Carolina, called Shadow Gap. It was an old logging route, barely mentioned in modern guides, known for eerie tales of lost hikers and strange markings. I wasn't looking for ghosts, just stories to flesh out my chapters. I packed my gear, a lightweight tent, a journal, a flint knife, a water purifier, and a handheld GPS I'd used on patrols. I told my editor I'd be off-grid for a week, left a map with my brother, and drove out, ready to reconnect with the wild. The road to Shadow Gap was a rutted nightmare, winding through dense pines that blocked the sun. The trailhead was unmarked, just a muddy pull-off with a rusted chain across the path. No signal, no other vehicles, just me and the forest. The first day's hike was rugged but familiar. The trail climbed through cedar groves, the air thick with damp earth and resin. I jotted notes about twisted roots and mossy boulders, perfect for my book. By dusk, I found a clearing near a trickling stream, ideal for camp. I pitched my tent, boiled water for instant noodles, and rope by headlamp, capturing the forest's quiet pulse. A few twigs snapped in the distance, likely deer, but nothing alarming. I slept soundly, lulled by the stream's murmur. I woke at 3 a.m. to a sound like breathing. Not mine, not an animal's. It was slow, deliberate, coming from just outside the tent, like someone exhaling inches from the nylon. I froze, flint knife in hand, listening. The breathing paused, then resumed, circling the tent, never rushing, never fading. I unzipped the flap a crack, flashlight trembling. The clearing was empty, moonlight casting long shadows, but the breathing continued, now whispering my name. "Caleb, come." My blood ran cold. I hadn't spoken my name aloud. I zipped up, gripped the knife, and sat rigid until dawn, the breathing fading only as the sky lightened. Morning brought unease. I checked the clearing. No footprints, but the grass was flattened in a jagged line, like something had dragged itself around my tent. A single object lay near the entrance. A smooth pebble, carved with a crude eye-like symbol, its pupil a deep gouge. I pocketed it, shaken, but pushed on, determined to find Shadow Gap's old logging camp. The trail grew wilder, roots snaking across the path, branches clawing at my pack. Around noon, I found remnants of the camp. Rusted saw blades, a collapsed bunkhouse, and a fire pit choked with ash. On a nearby tree, someone had carved symbols, eyes, spirals, and a stick figure with no face. I wrote a quick note in my journal, but my pen shook. The air smelled wrong, like rust and something sweet, like rotting flowers. By afternoon, I reached a ravine where the trees seemed warped, their trunks bending at unnatural angles. The breathing returned louder, accompanied by a low hum, like wind through a tunnel. I set up camp on a small ledge, hoping height would offer safety. It didn't. As night fell, the hum grew, forming words. "Caleb, see us." Footsteps joined in, heavy, crunching leaves circling below. I shone my flashlight, catching glimpses of movement, tall, skeletal shapes slipping between trees, too fast to focus on. Something scratched at the ledge's edge, slow and deliberate, like nails on stone. I stayed in the tent, knife ready, heart pounding, as the sounds looped closer. A single knock hit the tent pole, sharp, then silence. I didn't sleep, eyes locked on the entrance. At dawn, I found the ledge marked with Morai symbols, scratched into the rock, fresh and wet with sap-like liquid. My GPS was dead, screen black despite new batteries. I packed up, desperate to backtrack, but the trail seemed altered, landmarks gone, paths twisted. The hum followed, now constant, whispering. "Caleb, you're ours." The sweet rot smell thickened, making me gag. By midday, I stumbled into a clearing I hadn't seen before. In the center stood a rotted log, carved with hundreds of ice symbols, some fresh, some old. At its base was a pile of bones, animal skulls, human fingers, all polished, arranged in a spiral. A fresh carving read, "Caleb, 2025. My stomach dropped. I ran, journal flapping, knife in hand. The forest fought back. Branches snapped at my face, roots tripped me. The hum became a chant, echoing my fears, failures as a ranger, regrets from past patrols. Useless stay. Shadows moved in my vision, gaunt figures with eyeless faces, limbs too long, watching from every angle. They didn't chase, just appeared, guiding me deeper. Night fell fast, the hum deafening, shaking the ground. I found a hollowed stump and crawled inside, clutching the knife, praying for invisibility. The footsteps closed in, accompanied by a scraping, like bone on wood. Through a crack, I saw it, a figure tall and bony, draped in ragged cloth that pulsed like liquid. Its face was a smooth expanse, no eyes, just a slit mouth exhaling my name. Caleb. It reached toward the stump, fingers like twigs, scraping the bark. The chant grew. Join the echo. I slashed wildly, hitting something soft yet unyielding. A scream tore through the air, not from the figure, but the forest itself, a piercing wail that shook my bones. I bolted, running blind, thorns tearing my skin. Hours blurred, my water gone, my strength fading. Dawn broke, and the hum stopped. I staggered onto a logging road, collapsing as a truck approached. The driver, an old man, didn't speak, just drove me to a diner in silence. My journal was gone, lost in the run, but the pebble remained in my pocket, its eye staring up. Back home, I burned my gear, but at night, I hear the breathing, faint but closer, and I sleep with the knife, knowing the echo waits. What I'm about to tell you happened in the early winter of 2024, in a forgotten sliver of the Appalachian Mountains in eastern Tennessee, a place called Grimshade Hollow in the Cherokee National Forest. I've spent the last year trying to bury it, to tell myself it was just the cold and hunger playing tricks, but the welts on my wrists and the way my bones ache when the wind howls won't let me forget. I'm telling you this now because I need to warn you. Some hollows in these mountains don't just hide shadows, they weave them, and they'll bind you to their dark if you step too close. If you've ever felt the Appalachians turn cold and watchful, like the earth itself is sizing you up, you'll know why I'm done with those woods for good. I was 29, a botanist working on a grant to catalog rare mosses in remote forests. Grimshade Hollow was a last-minute tip from a colleague, a valley known for unique fungal growths, but avoided by locals due to stories of the weavers, entities that spun webs of shadow to trap the unwary. I'd laughed it off. Folklore was just human fear of the unknown, but the promise of untouched specimens pulled me in. I packed my gear, field kit, camera, recorder, a Leatherman tool, a .38 revolver for wildlife, and drove out alone, chasing data over caution. The trailhead was a muddy gap off a fire road, marked by a rotted sign. Grimshade, no trespass. The air was bitter, smelling of damp stone and something sour, like vinegar gone bad. I hiked in, the path twisting through pines and laurels, their branches draped with gray moss that swayed without wind. By noon, I reached the hollow, a sunken basin where the trees grew sparse, their trunks thin and twisted like spun thread. The ground was blanketed with a strange moss, black and silky, pulsing faintly underfoot. The silence was heavy, no animals, just a low, thrumming buzz like static in my teeth. I started collecting samples, noting the moss's odd texture. It clung to my gloves, leaving inky stains. Near the hollow's center, I found a relic, a rusted loom, half buried, its wooden frame carved with symbols, webs, eyes, jagged lines like broken threads. Nearby, a stone slab bore names: M. Holt 1899, C. Vance 1972, J. Ellis 2023. Mine was there, etched fresh, the stone still crumbling. My pulse spiked. I hadn't touched it. The buzz grew louder, forming whispers. "Weave, stay." I snapped photos, but my camera screen flickered, showing not the slab but a shadow, human-shaped, faceless, looming behind me. I spun, revolver drawn, but the hollow was empty. The whispers sharpened. Thread bind. I packed my samples, heart hammering, and headed back, but the path was gone, replaced by a tangle of roots and moss that seemed to shift, guiding me deeper. By dusk, I set up camp on a rocky ledge, hoping elevation would clear my head. I built a fire, its light dimmed by the heavy air, and checked my recorder. My voice logged the day, but beneath it, a rasping chant. "Yours, ours." The moss around my tent moved, creeping up the nylon, threading through the seams like stitches. Night was a nightmare. The buzz turned to a hum, vibrating the ground, and shadows danced beyond the fire. Tall, spindly, their limbs like spun silk, faces blank except for glowing eyes, white as bone. They didn't move like people. They glided, weaving between trees, trailing threads of black mist. I fired a shot into the dark. The bang was swallowed, the shadows untouched, their whispers laughing. "Give your thread." Something snagged my wrist, a cold, sticky strand, like spider silk but stronger, burning where it touched. I cut it with my Leatherman, but it left welts, forming web-like patterns that pulsed with my heartbeat. Dawn brought fog, thick and gray, smelling of rot and ink. My tent was cocooned in black moss, strands woven tight, forcing me to slash my way out. The slab was closer now, though I hadn't moved camp, my name glowing faintly, like it was written in ash. I ran, the hollow fighting me, roots snaring, moss clinging, the air thick with whispers. "Weave us, stay." I found a stream, its water black and viscous, bubbling with shapes, faces, hands pressing up, mouths chanting my name. I saw my dad, gone 10 years, his eyes white, beckoning. "Join the web." The trail looped, spitting me back to the slab 3 times. Each time, the shadows were closer, their forms clearer, bodies of moss and bone, faces shifting to people I knew. My dad, my old lab partner, a hiker I'd read about, J. Ellis, missing since last year. They wove strands around me, invisible but heavy, tightening my chest, my wrists. I stumbled into a cave, its mouth hidden by moss, hoping for refuge. Inside, the air was hot, thick with the stench of decay. The walls were draped in black webs, not silk but something alive, pulsing, strung with bones, human, animal, some fresh, glistening red. Carvings lined the stone. Webs, eyes, names, mine among them, still bleeding. The hum was deafening now, a chorus of the trapped. Thread bind forever. The shadows filled the cave, their eyes burning, hands spinning strands that burned my skin. One stepped forward, its face my dad's, but wrong, mouth aslit, eyes like moons. "Weave your grief." It hissed, wrapping my wrist in silk that cut to the bone. They knew my losses, my dad's cancer, my failure to save a friend from an overdose, every buried regret. I fired my revolver, bullets sinking into moss, useless. My knife slashed air, the strands tightening, pulling me toward a pit where the webs converged, a black void pulsing with faces. Hundreds, screaming silently. I fought, cutting strands, their touch like acid, welts spreading across my wrists, forming eyes that stared back. The cave shook, walls weaving shut, but I clawed through, bursting into the hollow. The shadows followed, their chants a storm. Blood for the weave. I ran, the forest a labyrinth, moss crawling up my legs, slowing me. Night fell, the hum a roar, the trees bending, their branches threading together like a net. I hid in a crevice, welts burning, shadows gliding past, their eyes searching. One leaned close, its face J. Ellis's, whispering, "You're woven now." Dawn broke, and I was crawling, half dead, to the trailhead. The moss fell away, but my wrists were raw, scars forming webs that throbbed. My truck was there, keys in my pocket despite losing my pack. A logger found me, drove me to a hospital in Johnson City, where they called it contact dermatitis from toxic plants. My gear was gone, recorder blank except for one clip. My voice screaming, "I'm not yours," over a hum like 1,000 looms. The moss samples? Dissolved, leaving black stains on my bag. The rangers searched Grimshade, nothing. No cave, no slab, no webs. I quit botany, moved to Knoxville, far from forests. The hum follows, in rain, in static, in my own pulse. My welts scar over, but they flare under starlight, forming eyes that watch me. I see them in mirrors, white and unblinking. Grimshade Hollow was a sacred site, Cherokee ground where shamans wove spirits into the earth, binding grief to guard the land. The weavers take the broken, threading their pain into the moss, their names into the stone. Hikers vanish there, their echoes trapped in the web. If you're in those mountains, avoid Grimshade Hollow. Don't touch the moss, don't follow the hum. And if you see your name in stone, run. The weave's got you, and it's spinning you tight.